All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to All Things Division 3 Soccer with SimpleCoach and Jackie. I am SimpleCoach. That pretty lady there is Jackie, Chief Dog Officer. So, about a year ago, on February 8th, I did a video. It was one of my first handful that I had done, called So You Want to Play Division 3 Soccer. And it basically talks about what I had learned at that point from the recruiting process, right? So you want to play, what do you got to do, sort of some of the observations. And I got these from basically two places, right? Where first was my own personal experiences with Simple Player number 1, and now Simple Player number 2, and then soon, eventually in a few years, Simple Player number 3, going through the recruiting process. Second spot I got gleaned the information from was from the coaches that I interview. A lot of the early interviews that I did, especially the first interviews I do with a coach, if I've never interviewed them before. The last segment, I just talk about recruiting. What does your recruiting process look like? What's the best way to get in touch with you? And I would try to glean information there. And so I compiled it all in this video. I'll share the link down in the description, because a lot of that is still, most of it, I think I watched it all. It's really, really pertinent. And you could argue that it's really pertinent to anyone who's going through the recruiting process, right? Like, and regardless of sport, I think, right? I'm sure each sport has its own peculiar things, but just generically how to communicate with a coach and things like that, things to be observant about and watch out for. And, it's really still applicable. So, a year's gone by. I've spoken with a ton of coaches. I've probably done 150, maybe 200 interviews. I don't know the exact count. I've spoken to a lot of folks about the recruiting process. Did some interviews with some folks that are specific about recruiting and college soccer. So, I picked up some more information, and I almost wanted to do this not as a refresh, because the video, wherever that I have, is still applicable. There are really nothing to change, but I did want to throw in some other thoughts that I had that are, important for recruits and parents, I guess, to just sort of be aware of some things. Again, this probably goes beyond sort of the tactical process of getting recruited, and more things that you really want to think about. So this is it. This is that second part to that original video. So, like I said, I'll post the video, the link to the video down below, and wherever it is that we'll post that as well. So, okay. So, the first place I want to start, let me get to my notes. The first place I want to start is about the coaches, right? So you as a recruit, keep in mind some things about the soccer coaches that you're talking to. And I'm going to steer clear of sort of where I can, the negativity of it. There's some negative parts realistically, there's negative parts to the recruiting process, and you just need to be aware of, right? First and foremost, as a player, assuming the academics in the school line up, right? But you got to be honest about that too, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. First up, the first thing you're going to want to know is, how does the team play, right? What kind of system do they use, right? Are they a possession-based? Do they like to keep the ball on the deck? Do they want to work it out of the back? Are they all about route one, getting it up top and just sort of throttling teams up there and creating chaos. Um, do they, are they just looking big, fast, strong? Every position, they're just going to compete, 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 compete. You know what? Because you as a player, you might have a particular way in which you prefer to play. And I would suggest, like, you want to line up to that, right? You want to give yourself the chance to succeed as best you can. And you want to line yourself up to a system of play at a school that you're going to be able to go in and feel as comfortable as you possibly can in a time period where it's going to be very uncomfortable, right? You're going to be new to the school. It's a new culture, you got all this responsibility now. So you're just going to want to be aware of that, right? And this is an error I think that we made with simple player number one, right? Here's a really technical player, loves to keep the ball on the ground, loves positional play, really mindful of where he's supposed to be on the field. Went to a place where he's, the team doesn't value that as much. So, right, like that's your first obstacle, and you don't want that to be an obstacle. So, yeah, I've said enough about the system. Another place that you're going to want to ask about is the off season. What does the off season look like? How much involvement does the coaching staff have in the players' lives? And again, this is Division III, so what's lifting look like? What's the how does the training schedule mount up? Right now, next year, not this spring, but next spring, they're going to have, I think it's 28 practice sessions, one game. I think that's the number. So, it's like 5 or 6 weeks of, 2 times a week, 3 times a week where you're going to be training. And what does that look like? What's sort of the expectation of the spring? Again, because that is a component, right? You're not just thinking about the fall, you are thinking about the spring, right? Like it's a full, like if you do it right and you're committed, there's soccer going to be played for a good part of your collegiate career, right? So you're going to want to be mindful of that. And then lastly, I'll just say, look, and I mean this respectfully because it's what I do, like as a regular job, right? In the recruiting process, there's a lot of salesmanship that goes on, right? Coaches trying to make you feel really special, wanting you to come in. They have a current situation with their roster, with their squad, and they might sort of gloss over some of that. So you're going to want to, you're definitely going to want to sort of take a look at that, right? Like, because the coach ultimately is selling his program, selling the school to bring you on as a recruit. Now the question is, right? Does he need you to start right out of the gate, or does he? You know what? You don't. He wants you, but he's thinking you got 2 years to sit on the bench before you start to play, or you got a sophomore who's really good and you're not going to see that time, or in the same class, so you're going to be a freshman, there's another freshman who's a lot better than you that's going to take your spot. So don't take on face value, and I mean this respectfully to the coaches, because it's a tough job, especially on the recruiting trail, and sort of how do you get schools interested. And look, and good salesmen don't lie, right? But right, they talk their strengths, they minimize their weaknesses. It's just a sort of the nature of the beast. So just be mindful of that when you're talking to a coach, and don't probe a little bit more. Like I said, system. Okay, if this is your system, how do I fit? Where would he see me? And uncover that a little bit, right? So that's the coaching side. Next up, I want to talk specifically about the players, because whereas the coaching side, I think, is what I expected. On the player side, it's a little bit of a um, there's some surprises, right? Like I never saw it from that vantage point until I started talking to some coaches. So, you know, listen, soccer players have to be honest, and there's coaches, and my kids, simple players 1, 2, and 3 all know, like I'm gonna be brutally honest. I just tell them the way I see it, and if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. They acknowledge that and they understand it, and so they're able to take that and sort of, how do they become better players? A lot of players are not that, right? So the first thing I would say, just like the coaches, is you got to be honest with yourself. You really have to be honest with yourself, right? And brutal honesty is okay, right? So, you know, do you have the skill level to play at the where you're aiming, right? At the schools that you're aiming. I mean this respectfully, and I'm sure they're out there, but you know, if you're playing on a town team, all due respect to the town teams, if you're playing on a town team, right, that just, plays other town teams and, doesn't do tournaments and that sort of thing. And, that's a level, right? And if you're looking to play in the Power Five in Division 1, or at a Tufts, or at a Messiah, or University of Chicago, right? Like at those levels, does your skill line up to that school, right? Because if you think your skill is so much better, then you should watch those schools, because you'll find out maybe that's not the case, and that you're maybe overshooting, and that you might like those schools, and that's fine. But from a soccer perspective, you might not get a look at all, just because your skill level is not up to the school's level, soccer level. Um, I would argue this too. Listen, and you know, you, academically, right? Everyone I know wants to go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Penn. If you got a 2.5, you're not going to Harvard, Princeton, Penn. You're not. You're just not. Hate to rain on your parade. So, right, don't even pretend to think that a soccer coach is going to be able to get you in with those grades. They have some sway, but you got to be in the same stadium as them academically to stand a chance, right? And I mean that with all schools, right? And I'm a big believer there's a school for everyone, but the first part of that is that you got to be honest about where you fit academically. And if you're, I don't even know, like if you're academically, you're only inclined to certain schools, well, then that becomes sort of where you're going to want to target, because that's, you stand a greater chance of getting in there, and hopefully the soccer piece aligns. And I would just say, like, what you're trying to do, and what I think, and I sort of said this in the original video, you want your academics and the soccer to align, right? So you want to do the best, you want to find the best school academically that you can get into, and you want to hopefully be able to play there, right? And that's a big deal, and that's hard to do, and you're going to have some reaches and what have you, but that's the sort of pool you want to swim in. You don't want to be overachieving academic, or overreaching for a school, an academic school, and then hope that the soccer, and aim for the soccer to get you in. It doesn't necessarily work that way anymore. So just be mindful of that, right? Like, be honest. This goes to the realistic part, honesty, be realistic, notice a theme. Um, you know, you got to be realistic. You are not going to walk in most places. You're not going to be a big fish anymore. You might have been a big fish on the team that you were playing for, but you're not going to be, more than likely, right? There's a pecking order. You're going to be a freshman. There's going to be a ton of new stuff, right? You're dealing with guys who are, more adult than you, and you're just going to be dealing with a lot. So, you're better off to be humble and go into that situation and be like, I'm going to learn everything I can, and don't have the expectation that suddenly people are going to, part when you come walking through. It just doesn't work like that anymore. And then lastly, about being realistic, and I spoke a little bit about this, about being honest, right? The honesty piece. Be realistic about your playing potential, right? What you're good at, what you're not good at, what you need to improve. Like, the more you understand that, the better you'll be able to carve your niche in college soccer. So I think I spoke enough about that, so I'll just leave it at that. And then lastly, you're going to have a work ethic. If you're lazy, that's going to shine through as soon as you step on campus. So you got to have a strong work ethic. Now, there's a great quote that I found, again, in sort of wherever where I walk around and check out things. So I just wanna read it, because I think it probably goes to the work ethic thing that more than you realize. Now, understand, in college soccer, you're playing for 3 months, right? And there's going to be another 6 months, let's say, where you're at school, but there's going to be different activities in the soccer world, and you're going to have to accommodate them, right? So you're going to have to want to work, and you're going to have to be prepared to do things. So I'll show it, but this thing, this meme, I don't know what it is, but it says, all kids want an offer. So very true. Not all kids want 6 a.m. waits, 8 in the morning to 12 12 noon classes, a 2 p.m. practice, a 4 p.m. film study, and then a 6 p.m. mandatory study hall. Right? If you're not ready to work, and you're not ready to put in the time, and you're not willing to do this, yeah, the offer is more important than the actual reality of what you're getting yourself into. So I love that. I love this thing. Okay, so, not that I want to be a downer, and I just wanted people to be realistic. And I'm not the only one saying this stuff, so I would point you in, and these are just my own personal favorites, I would say. And there are two in particular that I think are hugely invaluable. They're they're accessible to anyone. So, this one's a little interesting, because he talks a lot about other, not just Division 3, it's all soccer, right? On Twitter, at I am College Soccer Truth. I'd have no association with these folks. I just love reading it. This Twitter account is brutally honest about the recruiting process, and where you are, and what you think, and versus the reality, and really engaging. So I would suggest you look there, because I'm not the only one saying this stuff. In fact, that quote I read about every kid wants the offer, that came from College Soccer Truth, that I ripped off. I don't know if that's legal. College Soccer Truth can have its lawyer contact me. I don't know. So that's one. The other one, and I've actually interviewed Matt Baer, who's the founder of Discover College Soccer, has interviews with coaches to talk specifically about the recruiting process. What's the school like? Really, really intelligent discussion with with soccer coaches across the board, all divisions, whether it's junior college, NAIA, D3, D2, D1. He has these interviews, and there's a lot to glean. And especially if he's interviewed a school that you're interested in, might be a good place to check. And on Twitter, you can find him at discover_CS. And then he has a website, discovercollegesoccer.com. And actually, he has resources available to student athletes who are looking to do the recruiting process. Like the first one I saw was just sort of like the generic email introduction. And so you at least, he gets you to a starting point without you having to overthink it. So I would highly encourage both of these. If you have Twitter, I don't know if that's a hip thing or whatever, but if you have Twitter on anti-social media, you can, connect to these folks or follow these folks, and you'll get a lot of information, again, that I say, but lots of folks. All right, so that's about it for my update. So you want to play Division III soccer. Hopefully this information was valuable. Again, I'm not saying that I am the end all be all, and by far from it. I'm just stumbling along like many of you are through the recruiting process. And so I'm just trying to sort of pick pieces of information here and there to, again, ultimately help the simple players, and then to find some success in the recruiting process, because it can be frustrating from a player's perspective, right? Like, how many emails do you have to send out before you get an acknowledgement from a coach? And not to, the coaches, from their standpoint, they're getting hundreds of emails and video, and so it's just a really, really difficult thing for everybody, right? And so I just hope that you're thinking of things in a way, eyes wide open, fully understanding, and to best position yourself for success. And I think that's all I'm interested in. So I just want to thank you for watching today. Really do appreciate it, on behalf of Jackie, who is kind of KO'd right now. Thanks again. Thanks for the support, and hopefully this helps. If you have any additional ideas down below, absolutely. All right. Hopefully this was helpful, and we'll talk soon. If you like this show, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also find me on anti-social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks. This is a message from my Chief Marketing Officer. I think this keeps me